Good afternoon. I'm Aswani Valeri, Elon University's Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. Welcome to our first community town hall with senior administrators. I'm joined today by President Book and several of my senior staff colleagues. Also with us on the screen are Executive Vice President Dr. Stephen House, Vice President for Strategic Initiatives Dr. Jeff Stein, Vice President for Inclusive Excellence Dr. Randy Williams, Vice President for Student Life, Dr. John Dooley, and Vice President for Access and Success, Dr. Jean Radigan-Rohr. Ahead of this meeting, we have received more than 60 questions. And if you're watching this on Elon Live, there's a form on the page for you to submit questions while you're watching. Your questions are important to us and help us understand what's on your mind. Because the volume of questions we received, we cannot get to every issue. So we've grouped the questions into the most frequent topics and issues that have been raised. We will begin today with the largest number of questions we received related to COVID-19 pandemic. We will also address last Saturday's upsetting caravan that moved through campus. And we will talk about Elon's efforts related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ways we can make progress on fighting racism in our community. Be it COVID, race relations, or economic uncertainty, Elon community, this region, and nation as a whole, we are going through some extraordinary and challenging times. In these uncertain times, it's natural to crave for certainty and less ambiguity. We don't have a roadmap to answer all these questions. No school in the nation has figured this out, but we are talking to each other and learning from each other and adapting and improving our approaches. We're all juggling multiple things and doing our best. I urge all of us to give ourselves a break and do the best we can. Let's give ourselves permission to pause some things and lift each other up in times of need. President Book, would you like to make any comments before we get started?
Well, I'll just say that first, thanks for moderating, Provost Belletti. I do agree that this observation you just made about service and other things, and we're all trying to juggle multiple responsibilities, many of them new and for the first time. So it's okay to, and I, personally, I'm thinking a lot about that classroom experience, and I know faculty and our staff here who are supporting that are dealing with multiple environments of teaching and learning, and it's creating lots of challenge. And so I know that takes a lot of extra energy. I'll just thank everyone for being here today. One of the key reasons we are having this is because we have a normal communication rhythm, and it pre-COVID, and that normal communication rhythm, we're needing more communication with everything that's happening. And so I'm grateful for everyone who submitted very thoughtful questions, and for the senior team for being here to have this live conversation this afternoon. So thank you. We can appreciate it.
Thank you, President Book. We should begin with the news that was announced this morning by Vice President Jeff Stein that Elon is moving to a temporary social hiatus because of the increased number of COVID cases we've seen in the past week. Dr. Stein, would you please explain these new developments and why are we taking these steps and what are we doing?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As most of you know, in an effort to continue the progress we're seeing from targeted testing and identifying cases on campus, we announced that as of 5 p.m. today and through the end of next Wednesday, September 30th, we're implementing a social hiatus to disrupt and slow the spread of the virus. We hope this will aid the techniques we're using, and hopefully it will avoid the campus from shifting from our current level 3 high alert status on our campus dashboard and alert matrix. So this social hiatus includes all dining services shifting from to grab and go meals, starting with dinner this evening. No visitors are allowed in residence hall rooms or apartments. Non-essential travel should be limited. Intercollegiate athletics has been suspended, as have club sports, Elon outdoors trips, and intramurals. And all in-person campus events and activities are being reviewed to reduce or eliminate risk. So a very careful eye on those upcoming events. So during this time, classes and campus offices remain open, but perhaps the most important things that I think we announced this morning, and particularly two things for students, were one, the obvious that we need students to take care of themselves, right? This is a lot of stress, as has already been mentioned. Any semester is stressful, but we're aware that COVID and other issues only add to that. And then we ask that everyone closely examine, reassess, and reduce their personal interactions. All of these efforts are being made because we are seeing the spread of the virus through social interactions. And while it may be corny, we use the term in the email this morning about reducing the size of our personal bubbles. You know, we may have come to campus thinking that a certain size group that we were interacting with would be okay. And what we are saying today is that circle of personal contacts needs to be much smaller. That's where we're seeing the spread, is in those social interactions. Everything we've been looking at in terms of tracing points to this. So we need everybody to reset, to recommit to these restrictions and guidelines, and we've got to reduce our social interactions. We can't be socializing with a whole department or our whole floor or a whole club. It's got to be 1 to 3 people. And of course, we've got to be wearing masks and physically distancing at all times. I'll just say 2 more things on this. We're aware that this announcement comes at a challenging time, including that this Sunday evening begins the holiest time of the year in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. And so we want to support our Jewish students, faculty, and staff at this time of year, and want to hear from those folks if there's ways we can support them during this social hiatus. We've certainly been in contact with Hillel and others about how we can do that. But generally, I'd say we know this is hard for everyone. Everyone is anxious, and we need to support each other through this. And I will just say, from Ready and Resilient, and I think for the entire campus, we appreciate the efforts of our entire community to dig in right now and slow the spread.
Thank you, Dr. Stein. I got a couple of follow-up questions for this one. Talking about social hiatus, how do you plan on enforcing the new rules in the next 5 days? If you and or Dr. Dooley can take a pass at answering the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Our staff who are on campus, who are in the residence halls, are certainly deeply involved in this. But I would say that staff in every single area of campus are working hard to help to enforce this. Students will see more staff on campus, I would guess, this weekend. And our staff in dining are stepping up to help with the dining efforts. Our student life staff are going to be very engaged over the weekend and through this social hiatus. They are at all times, but I think everyone on campus is going to be deeply involved in that. Dr. Dooley, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that covers it well.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Dooley, Dr. Stein. The follow-up question for this is, how can we say for certain there is no evidence spread is happening in the classroom/office setting? Does it mean all new cases are purely the responsibility of students?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that I would play the blame game here, right? What we know from the health department and local health officials is these cases are spreading through social settings where people are not wearing masks and aren't distancing. And excuse me, as my phone's ringing there. As we analyze these cases, as we work with data analytics folks, as well as infectious disease folks, and as I said, the health department, we are not seeing that these are cases being spread other than social. And I need to be very honest. We all know this is a virus that spreads and presents asymptomatically, which makes it exceedingly challenging. And also means that masks are our #1 defense. But I can only tell you that we are not tracking cases that are spreading in the classroom, not because we're not paying attention. We're not seeing that spread at all. We're not seeing it in offices. Where we're seeing this is in social settings without masks, and that doesn't mean we should all, we can take any sort of fewer precautions. We all need to keep our guard up. As Dr. Archinal tells us, we need to behave as if we or others have the virus and wear a mask and keep distance. That is the only way that everyone on this campus and beyond can work to help slow the spread.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sai. And I agree with your assessment. Looking at the data analytics team and the results and where the infections are growing, mostly these are coming from social interactions and social settings. And following up on that question, is there any way to discourage and prevent socializing at the local bars and restaurants, recognizing that we are part of a town of Elon and we don't necessarily control all the surroundings?
Yeah, we have been in very close contact with the town of Elon, and they communicate regularly with local businesses. Anytime we ever have a concern, we are sharing that. I think that's a great question because our students are part of this community. And what we've tried to be aware of is both how our campus impacts the community and how the community impacts the campus. But we have been very open with the town anytime we have concerns, just as they come to us about concerns. And I think we should all be talking to students, faculty, and staff about our social interactions, right? And should not be in spaces where there's not mask wearing or distancing.
Yeah. Thank you. The next question I often get is, if Elon moves to a very high alert and students shelter in place and go online for, let's say, 2 weeks, what will campus services be like? And can you tell us a little more about whether students will get mail, how dining halls will operate, whether they can get food and supplies delivered from local grocery stores, et cetera?
It's a great question. And we just had a development last night on this. The Student Government Association voted, am I allowed to say this, John Dooley? Yeah, they voted to support shipped memberships for a large block of students, and they're going to pay for these. So that means students could get groceries, some prescriptions, and also items from Target, I believe, delivered. That's just a really, they've been working on that for a while, and we appreciate their support. But everyone's asking about this sort of quarantine of campus. Makes us nervous. It seems like a very tangible thing to worry about in terms of where we might go if we end up in a very high alert. So I'll just say that as we learned about other campuses shifting to a campus quarantine, we actually reached out to them to try to learn best practices from their processes, and have talked to a few campuses. What we've heard from them is that as campuses use this approach successfully, they tend to shift all courses online. They tend to shift all dining to this grab and go that we're using as of 5 p.m. today. They eliminate all visitors to campus. They move all events or activities to virtual offerings. They increase quarantine and isolation as well as testing. And so the Ready and Resilient Committee members have quickly started thinking about those plans as soon as we spoke with other campuses and started planning for how these things might work at Elon. I want to be clear that, going back to an earlier question, sometimes it sounds like we're blaming or making students the bad guys, or treating students like these contagious beings. I try to think of these situations as if I'm considering my own college-age kids, what they do, what they try to do, how to help them in these situations. And I say this because while a quarantine of the entire campus would certainly involve a lot of limiting of behaviors, curtailing of opportunities for the spread of the virus, many fewer interactions, we also have to pay careful attention in this to students' health and well-being, just as we would think about ourselves in these situations. So other campuses have reminded us that students have to be able to, put on a mask and go outside for a walk. They have to get fresh air, go pick up a meal from the dining hall. They've also told us that study space is something we have to think about, because when you have students living together in a double room or something like that, taking class online at the same time, you may need study space. So that's helped us to think more broadly. More specifically, can students go to events or hang out all night in the hallway with their floor? No. But I think one other connected piece of this is that people are asking if there is sort of a campus quarantine, and folks have used the term of lockdown, which I don't think is the right way to look at this. We need to all understand that the CDC and state and local and public health officials have been exceedingly clear that a campus quarantine means students stay here. Those that are here stay here. Those that are away from campus stay away. And I know that many would be compelled to come to campus or to depart campus. And that really only risks the health of others. And that's something we need to really avoid. But we won't be in a mode where it's just students here and no one else is here, right? We would all be very involved, these same staff that we're talking about, in trying to support students and keep things going. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I got a couple questions about level 4, but before I get to that, there was one question. I'll take a crack at it. Why not be proactive and take our classes online for a week or two? Just as Dr. Stein mentioned, the Radiant Resilient team, along with the data analytics team, when we looked at where the infections are happening and how they're occurring, we do not see a lot of spread inside the classrooms. In fact, I teach a class, Elon 101, and when I talk to students, majority of the students want to have a face-to-face experience. That's Elon's model. That's the reason why they came here. And while we would not discount changing this modality if should conditions change, at this point in time, looking at the precautions we're taking and looking at what students are requesting from us and how learning happens in an Elon setting, we're very comfortable leaving the face-to-face classes as is, with the recognition that everybody has a different level of tolerance, they have different needs, and we have already accommodated faculty and staff as well as students who requested remote teaching or remote learning. For that reason, we are going to hold the model right now and keep an eye on how things go in the future. Dr. Stein, what numbers would tell Elon that it should go to a campus lockdown? And if the campus goes into a lockdown, how will that be enforced? And people have heard that some with COVID-19 and those with close contacts are already returning to their homes to quarantine with families. And doesn't that go against the CDC guidance, just like you mentioned right now?
Yeah, I want to remind people that we are not at level 4, and so we all need to, as anxious as we might be, and as new as we all are at this, we need to pause because we're not there yet. I think it's important to note that we are looking at every single case, that we are doing analysis on where cases are in terms of residents, academics, clubs, you name it. We're looking at all these pieces and trying to triangulate and get help from experts. But we're not there yet. And if we see that the numbers go into level 4 based on our alert matrix, we'll take action. And what you saw as we moved to level 3 high alert is that we tried to use the matrix and the key operational guidance, but also tried to use the context. We didn't want to just put a blanket on top and think that would solve where we are. So I think we want to also try to be focused on where the cases are when we do this. We should all be ready that anything, I've got the matrix on screen here, that any of these guidance points could occur, but we're going to do our best to make the best decision in the moment. Should we be ready that these could happen? Yes, because this is a dangerous virus, but And I'm probably drifted off the question there, but I just want to remind folks that, yeah, we will take those actions based on the context as we get there. Did I answer that question?
Yeah. And just to follow up on the comment that you just made, should things go in that direction, in a campus lockdown, would students be able to socialize on their floors? Can they go outside?
And that's sort of what I mentioned earlier about, while we wouldn't allow anyone to go home and we wouldn't have socializing, students have to go outside, and the health department and public health officials would tell us they cannot be locked in their rooms if that's the situation we're in. Now, that doesn't mean we have extensive interactions or you know, things outside of the residence halls. It just means they need to go outside and get fresh air and go for a walk. They just can't do group activities and that sort of thing. They still have to get their food. They still have to go, to your earlier question, to get prescriptions potentially at the mailroom. Just means they're not going to spend a lot of time there.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the lockdown, et cetera. How would classes operate during a lockdown, and what would happen to classes after the lockdown ends?
I was going to turn that one back over to you, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. I'm happy to take that. As we talked, as we planned out in all our planning documents in consultation with the faculty, staff, deans, et cetera, the approach would be to go remote instruction for 2 weeks during a lockdown, and keep an eye on how the infections are progressing. And based on that, slowly bring the classes back to face-to-face or hybrid or remote as was the case before the lockdown, and carefully look at it. But the key is to make sure we are keeping an eye on how the infections are progressing. But the plan is to go into a 2-week remote instruction should this condition happen.
And I would just add to that we've seen some campuses that have chosen sort of a step down approach once after lockdown, and they start adding features back. Others have just opened wide up. It really depends on the situation, how you want to reopen.
Yeah. Also, there has been some thinking that positive COVID cases among staff have doubled in the last 10 days or so. Could you please provide further detailed information regarding these transmissions? Did the staff contract the virus due to exposure at Elon while working, or did it happen outside, part of their family interactions? I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit.
My hands are tied a little bit because of HIPAA, but I would say to the question about spread on campus or in offices, not to our knowledge. If there were that kind of concern, we would certainly work directly with that department. But I would also say that whenever there is a positive case, out of extra precaution, we contact casual contacts and offer them testing options, just to go the extra step to be careful. But we are not seeing that kind of spread among staff on campus. And to be clear, I believe the number went from 3 to 6 staff. Just, you said doubling.
Yeah, it's a small number, but yes, thank you.
Any number is too big, right?
Yeah, thank you. There's a question about testing. Can you tell us a little more about how is the testing progressing? Why can't everyone be tested? And have you considered or investigated using wastewater testing in dorms and campus-owned or managed apartments as a way to provide focus for need for testing and contact tracing? And I also understand that we are searching for a testing company, and can we just use more LabCorp tests, et cetera. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about testing and scaling and what options we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I never thought I'd be answering questions about testing for COVID-19, but I'm happy to answer. And these are really important questions, and it says that our community is aware that testing is a really important tool. Please remind me if I don't remember to talk about the wastewater testing, to come back to that. But where I'd say we're struggling, like most institutions, is getting enough asymptomatic testing capacity. So unfortunately, access to faster, highly accurate, and affordable testing is a challenge. We learned from our community that, while it worked and worked well, our pre-semester testing was still a little bit unwieldy and expensive. and probably too slow. So testing capacity does vary across the country. My son's university in Connecticut and many schools in the Northeast, they're able to work with and partner with the Broad Institute out of MIT and Harvard, who was unable to work with us. And Broad is able to provide large amounts of tests quickly at minimal cost, sometimes less than $30 a test. You notice that large universities or research universities often have labs that are already CLIA certified that they're using to process tests. Other institutions are fortunate to have a university hospital attached and they're using those labs. Honestly, we don't have such a partner available to us at this time that can really handle the affordable, the effective, and when I say effective, I mean high accurate tests and the speed. But this is something we are spending a lot of time. I say we, there's a team on Ready and Resilient Committee that's working on this. We're talking to labs, hospitals, test companies, test suppliers, and more. During this call, I saw a call from, during this town hall, I saw my phone rang with a testing company calling that I'm playing phone tag with. But we're looking at PCR testing, antigen testing, pool testing, and we have looked at wastewater. These tests are designed for different things. So antigen testing is designed for symptomatic patients predominantly. And many of the new antigen tests that you're hearing about are hard to get supplies for. So the new Abbott test, for example, they directed their first 150 million tests to the federal government. So that's going to be a few months before we can get that test. The new Cadell Sophia 2 has been diverted to nursing homes. But every week we're making connections and calls. I will say honestly, when we sent this email the other day mentioning that we were struggling to find testing partners, we had lots of folks call us up who had connections, and that's been helpful of late. But to be specific, we spoke with 2 potential lab companies last week, and a lab supplier and a hospital. And this week we spoke with 3 additional lab companies, and we have an additional call with a testing company on Tuesday. I think we're getting close in the next couple of weeks to be able to provide to significantly increase testing, which we need to do. It's an essential tool. You got to remember that all these medical firms and labs are also new at this and developing new tests every day. But I would just say to wrap this up, that we're doing the best we can using our increased testing every week to provide both random testing, but now more so targeted testing to help us understand the campus conditions. And I forgot to go back to the wastewater testing, which we considered, our physical plant folks looked into that as early as this summer and just analyzed the cost and the supplies. We're a little bit challenged on campus. Where you see this working well are large campuses. So you can imagine a residence hall of 1,000 students, like a tower. That's really helpful to narrow down that whether there's COVID in that building. For us, because our buildings are smaller and they're in neighborhoods that are also close to the town of Elon, the pipes aren't differentiated as much that if you tested, you would be able to know which building it came from. So we've chosen to spend that money on testing elsewhere.
Thank you, Dr. Stein. I'm going to shift us just a little bit because I want to make sure that we have time for the other topics. And I'll shift with a question that came in about students in the student experience. And I'm going to toss it to you, Dr. Dooley, with the question that we had that, and actually, this was from a faculty perspective about our students, that students are so worried right now with COVID, political unrest, work obligations, financial worries. So what can Elon do to support their mental health and a nurturing learning environment?
Yeah, thanks, President Book. I think that it's a good question. And when we get a question like that, oftentimes we immediately, when we hear mental health, we immediately think about counselors and counseling appointments and those kinds of things. And certainly we have for students who are finding themselves in crisis or urgent need. We have got counselors on call 24/7 and a counseling staff ready to support and assist students. But I think really what's underneath this question are the day-to-day worries and concerns that we carry, and not just students are carrying, that we're all carrying in different ways. And so some of this is just about mental wellness and being able to be healthy and balanced in our approach. And I think for all of us, some of this is also just taking good care of oneself, getting good sleep, eating well, making healthy choices. I mean, if I could offer for students during times of stress, the number one thing that they could do is to get good sleep in the evening. And I think that's really important. Sometimes it's also doing things like taking a break from social media and finding a way to step aside from the things that you're concerned about and worrying about, to take a walk, to clear your mind and get some perspective. And so I think that all of those activities, whether it's physical activity. The other thing for us on our campus is that relationships are critically important. And I think each one of us plays an important role for each other. And so I know the question, it sounded like came from a faculty or staff member, but I think that each of us on campus is caring for each other in lots of ways. And so it's just being available for each other. It's good mentoring, good relationships, and good care. And so just reaching out with folks and being ready to ask, how are you doing? This is a really difficult time. And being ready for that response and to offer a caring response, which I think happens really well here at Elon, but we are certainly in very unprecedented times.
So in the interest of time, let me switch over to the second topic, the caravan that passed through the campus this past weekend. The question that I got is, I was happy to hear Dr. Book speak specifically about the convoy that drove through campus. However, I'm disappointed that she said while most of the people who drove to the campus were respectful, since the cars I saw on the news were covered in Confederate flags. Can you explain what you meant and elaborate on the comment? President Book.
Thanks, Aswani. What I'm going to do is answer that question, but I'm also going to couple a couple of other questions that we got on this same topic. And first, let me just start out by saying that our community, the people of color and the women in our community who were the target of that harassment that we saw on video that made the news and was on social media. I want you to know that it hurts me to see that I go to bed at night thinking about that and I wake up thinking about that. And my goal on campus and across our university is to create conditions where that doesn't happen, here on our campus and in the world. And I think about, in the world, what I mean there is that our main mission is to educate here. And I absolutely believe when you provide an education that you are making an investment in a better world. And the kind of human dignity and respect that we want on our campus and in the world. So I'll just start out by saying that, and and the deep hurt that I know our students and our faculty and staff and many members of the community are feeling about what we witnessed on video from Saturday. When I was describing that event, I know we saw several cars on video. It actually had more than 230 participants that made their way through campus. This was we knew as a campus, we knew there was a rally happening not far from here at Ace Motor Speedway. What we didn't know, and it was being hosted by the Young Republicans, and what we didn't know is that we knew there was going to be a motorcade, a convoy that would leave that rally. And we didn't know that they would make their way through campus, but we were on alert that that could happen. And so our campus police, I talked in my video this week that political convoys are a relatively new tool. Most of the time we've interacted with a motorcade, it's been because of a funeral. It's been because of, some other type of, I talked about vintage cars, trying to give examples. They're normally not political convoys. So this is something different. And I've asked for a roundtable to get together to talk about it. One of the questions that came in was, well, why were they allowed to run the red lights? And our approach has been in the past to any motorcade on campus like this is to get them through quickly. That is the safety strategy. Let's get them through quickly, get them to the other side, and so that they're not a threat to campus operations. So I'm hopeful that we can get very quickly a group together to talk about this. So in my message where I'm saying the majority were mostly respectful, I'm thinking about the norms of civic engagement. And motorcades and that kind of thing are within the norms of civic engagement. What I'm not going to do, and what I have personally made a practice of not doing, is naming hate groups and giving any specific information about hate groups where it actually ends up giving people, it promotes and gives access to those views. And so I was intentionally not naming any party involved in this in my remarks on to the campus. I will say too that one of the things that's on my mind through all of this is we got a question, are you, that came in, is, are you saying that, and let me just read what the sentence said here. I strongly oppose the offensive comments that were shouted by people in the caravan, and I fully support the no trespassing orders Elon has levied against those individuals. But is it really the right message to send to our students that we are willing to ban people from campus and from public roads, no less, that we disagree with? Will we be accused of quashing free speech? And what I want to say is there's a difference between free speech and what we saw happen on our campus in targeted harassment. That is not protected and is not is not allowable on our campus. So our campus, we can say no trespass. A public road brings in a more challenging environment about what's allowed on a public road, but we can no trespass from our campus. And some people sent in questions, well, why do that? And it's because I want, with every tool I have, to be able to create a safe space on our campus and it's a way to create a record should we have any interactions with those people again. The other tool we have, and people also said, why would you want to ticket people who are, because I spoke about trucks and cars driving through campus who are also, we had 2 reports into our bias system that shouted sexist and racist things from their car. It's important to me that we issue no trespass to people who behave that way on our campus. We don't have many tools in our pocket to fight this kind of behavior, and that is one of the tools that we can do, and with the ultimate goal of creating a safe campus. So I have asked for this roundtable, and I'm really grateful. Many members of our community sent in. I'm happy to serve on that, to talk about how to manage this new political convoy in the future. Should we send out an e-alert? Was one of the questions we got. And that certainly is a tool for discussion. Should we do that? In the interim, I want that conversation to happen as quickly as possible. But in the interim, I have asked our police department if they have any knowledge of that kind of activity happening again, to go ahead and send out an e-alert so people are aware while we wait for that decision but that group, the roundtable, to get together and us to create a way forward. I'm going to ask Dr. Dooley, there were a couple of questions that came in specifically about students and as related to this. I'm going to ask Dr. Dooley to also respond to that.
There were a couple questions that came in, and one of them asked about I'll just read it. As the parent of a freshman living in the historic neighborhood, the news of the caravan is quite concerning. Is it possible to close Haggard Avenue to through traffic at campus? And that is certainly a question that we've gotten from other folks as well. Obviously, when you have a question about closing a public road, that's not a decision that the university makes by itself or in isolation. We have closed Haggard Avenue from time to time for things like commencement or homecoming activities, special event kinds of things. So we've been in conversation with the town of Elon about what that might look like to close Haggard Avenue for some different periods of time this fall on an experimental basis and see how that might happen. But that's a conversation that we'll need to engage with the town as we think about this as a public road. So we'll look at that and hopefully maybe have some opportunities to do that, at least starting with some temporary closures over the course of the fall semester. But that'll be an ongoing conversation. There was another question about what about our students' voices? What about college Republicans, college Democrat groups we have at Elon? Are they no longer allowed to be active on campus or advocate their positions? And I think that that's absolutely, we need our students to be active and to communicate those positions. It's part of our university's mission as you think about robust political debate and freedom of conscience and liberty of thought. I mean, those are things that we need to absolutely embrace and uphold, and we do. But as President Book said, some of what we saw on Saturday had nothing to do with that. It was pure and simple hate that was directed at individuals. And we can't have that as part of our conversation. But I absolutely believe that regardless of political affiliation, we can all agree that we can stand up against hate and the kinds of things that we saw on Saturday. And that's not a political question. So, we will be absolutely working with our campus groups in the fall. We've been doing a lot of work with the Elon Votes Initiative. I hope every student is already registered to vote right now. There are lots of things that will be happening over the course of the fall semester, sponsored by the university, but also sponsored by students and college Republicans, college Democrats, but other groups as well to engage in the political debate. We have to have people engaged in these kinds of issues, but we also need to do it in a way that's consistent with our honor code and our values as an institution.
Thank you, Dr. Dooley. There's a question that came up. What steps is Elon University taking right now to mitigate these kind of the events that happen, and how do we prevent a reoccurrence of this kind of event going forward? I was wondering if Dr. House can take the question.
Thank you, Provost Belletti. Part of that question also talked about the fact that bringing some extra officers in on Saturday wasn't the right thing to do because people don't feel safe with extra policing. So right now we have had the mutual aid review agreement committee working, and I've been working closely with Interim Chief Dotson, and it makes me sad to hear people say they feel less safe with more police around, because I know working with Chief Dotson now and his officers, how much they try to maintain and support our mission and our values and our goals. And they want to protect us. They want to do their job, and they want to do it well. Well, the review committee has finished its work and will be submitting next week recommendations to President Book. And it will be to build on the good work that has started by Chief Dennis Franks and Dotson, and with the accreditation that the university has received through IACLEA, which clearly sets Elon apart from other police departments. But to build on that, and we will be searching for a new chief of police. This could be a very exciting opportunity for a new chief to come in and build on this. And what we want to do is develop some social justice and racial equity goals, which are certainly part of IACLEA. I would like to strive for having Elon be a best practice in being a campus police department. And then when it comes to the mutual aid agreement, to work most closely with the agencies that support the same mission, values, and goals that are part of Elon. So I think we can continue to grow in this and continue to make this better. And hopefully we want everybody to be feel supported by the Elon University Police Department.
Thank Dr. House. Talking about how faculty, staff, and students are feeling right now, given the challenging circumstances we're in, here is a question from a student of color. As a Black student, it feels like my voice and concerns aren't being heard. I feel like no one on this campus cares about me or other students of color. How are you going to change this? I'd like Vice President Radigan Rohr, overseeing the office, Access and Success, to take the question, please.
As sad as that question feels to me, I know that several students of color, and particular Black students, have said that they're scared. And the caravan on Saturday with the flying Confederate flags and the racial slurs hurled out of windows are really terrifying for them. And when we couple that with the national climate of discord and racial animus, students, and I might say faculty and staff, want to feel that they feel safe on our campus. Folks are stressed. Mental health is frayed. And this is not simply a task for centers such as CREED or the Center for Access and Success. Students are already retreating to those spaces for care and comfort. We see them every day in here. Even in the age of COVID, they're coming in masked, looking for support and feeling of being cared for. But as much as those of us in these centers would like to believe that we're doing very well in these areas by our students, that's simply not enough. We need our entire Elon community, faculty and staff, working to surround and support our students, particularly at such a time as this. Well, I've heard from some folks who say to me, well, Jean, I'm not so sure. I know I want to be supportive, but I'm not sure I want to do the right thing, and I'm not sure I know what to do. And believe me, there is no shame in not knowing. You might ask for help for folks who work in these areas, but I believe we simply must, all of us, commit ourselves to the goal of ensuring that our students aren't walking around our campus with that feeling from that student who posted that question, the feeling of no one cares about them. So I guess a question we might begin to think about is for each of us in the privacy of our own minds, begin to ask ourselves this question: what am I going to do to commit myself in ensuring that our students of color feel cared for on our campus?
Thank you, Dr. Rohr. In the interest of time, I'd like to switch over to the third topic, which is the diversity, equity, and inclusion. As all of you have seen, the summer President book put out very specific action items and challenged us to look at infusing diversity curriculum or diversity elements of curriculum into every student's curriculum. And the question is, what does making progress on the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on campus actually look like? Like Vice President Williams and our President Book to answer the question.
Thanks, Provost Villetti. Oh, sorry, President.
No, you go. You can start.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think this is a great timing for this question to follow up on Dr. Radigan Rohr's previous answer. This has to be a shared responsibility. There's no one single person, there's no one single office, no one single center that will make this a success. In order for us to see progress, we have to have this somewhat personal to us, that this is a part of our roles as being effective educators. We have admitted and accepted a wide range of students, faculty, and staff at this university through search processes that we've hired people, and through admissions processes in which we've admitted students. And when we admit these students and when we select members as colleagues, we admit and select their whole selves, everything that makes them their unique selves. In that process, that communicates a commitment to help each individual to flourish, to develop in oneself so that they can get the full range of experiences at Elon and benefit from this education in this community. So it's a shared responsibility where we actually grow from being a part of this, and we make the experience not just of marginalized identities better, but the entire community better. That's what being an effective educator is to recognizing who is in your community, getting proximate with the members in your community. And when it becomes personal to you, when it becomes something that matters to you, you will open up a conversation to check in with a friend. Dr. Dooley mentioned earlier about, it's not just on the mental health therapists that we have in our counseling center. While they're very astute and effective, we all can employ some counseling skills. We interact with people in our families, we interact with people in our communities, and because we care about them. And same thing in our spaces, whether in the classroom, whether in administrative or service offices, we can reach out to members who just might be affected by what you've seen in the news. And that acknowledgement, that simple asking, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? That conveys a sense of I matter, I am seen, I am accepted here in this community, someone has reached out to me. So I think when we get to a point of this shared responsibility, whether that is in not being one individual person, regardless of identity, no one individual center or unit, regardless of their duties and responsibilities, but the entire campus has to be this way. And that's a part of our duty as being effective educators, from teaching faculty, from administrators, to all the various roles on this campus that make this complex, vertically and horizontally place operate. We are all educators, and we, in order to be effective, I think progress will look like everyone hands on deck here.
Those are great observations, Dr. Williams. I'll follow up with additionally, when you think about what does progress look like, certainly when our community is responding like Dr. Williams just described, that will certainly be an indicator of progress. I also think of it very practically from budgetary standpoints. And so this year, and also actionable items, this summer, I talked to the campus about 5, and then Dr. Williams followed up with an additional 10. I'll speak to the 5 I talked about. One is that Dr. Williams was a member of our senior staff, but was not a vice president. He was an associate provost working across inclusive excellence and civic engagement. So this summer, I promoted Dr. Williams to Vice President and Associate Provost for Inclusive Excellence. And the difference between the two is that Dr. Williams now joins the Vice President's team. So this means that the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is in the middle of every day of every decision-making process that we have as a senior team. And he's brought a lot to the conversation, and very appreciative of his leadership. This is a new vice president for the university. So over the last couple of months, we've been reorganizing and working to articulate his role. And so I'll be rolling that out. I've started to share that across the campus. And so you'll be hearing, and there's a diagram that shows a new Office of Inclusive Excellence as part of this redesign and reorganization. I also called on the faculty to work with the provost and the deans to infuse a curricular requirement around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the reason this is so critical is that we wouldn't want any student to graduate that hadn't grappled with the critical knowledge and understanding of our country's diversity, how that intersects at every level, political, social, economic. We want all of our students to graduate. We want all of our faculty and staff to also have that knowledge. So this has to happen and be infused. It's critical work for the university. And I committed to providing the resources, meaning pushing forward a budget priority that whatever the costs are to deliver what's designed, I will support. I also very practically excluded the diversity and equity inclusion work and efforts from the frost on hiring. And so we had a couple of vacancies in some of our identity offices that provide critical support to students. Rather than delaying those hires, we proceeded ahead and prioritized them. We also added a position for the law school students, as well as other graduate programs to support diversity and equity and inclusion. That advertisement is out. So we've moved the budgetary dollars to support that. We also have had work unfold over the last several years using our shared governance process around support for initiatives. And so we proceeded with the hiring of those. For example, we added an additional diversity-focused admissions counselor to support the operations of admissions. We have other budgetary-like items that we're moving forward. I mean, I want to say that this is, a critical area of funding for the university. And then lastly, I will also share that this summer, the board voted to remove the name of William Harper off of Harper Hall, a residence hall. And this happened after writings that Harper had done while he was dean of the faculty of Elon. So this is in 1919, were brought forward, which specifically promoted ideas around white supremacy. And so we are working, that happened over the summer when we weren't in session on campus and at a distance, but we're working to gather a group that can review what happened this summer, learn from it as an after action. So I'm looking forward to that effort and to be as a follow-up to that action. So to me, those are the action-oriented pieces, and those are the 5 that that I talked about personally this summer, but then also Dr. Williams talked about 10 additional others, and I know Provost Folletti, you're working on several of those with him. They affect every unit, so they're widespread. We've got teams of people, and we've created timelines for those action items.
Yeah, thank you, President Book. I think I'd like to follow up on some of the comments you made. Thank you for providing the resources and the direction to go to implement some of these initiatives. The next question is about hiring, as well as how do you ensure that everybody is following what we thought they would, and how did it translate to curriculum? In the interest of time, I'd like to make a brief comment about those things. As far as hiring goes, as President Book committed additional resources to ensure that we're delivering the curriculum in these areas. I'm working with the human resources, the deans, and Vice President Williams, in making sure that we have equity-minded hiring protocols. We are looking at areas that are in need, and there is already excellent work that is being done in the DEI space in terms of scholarship and teaching in various areas. Pardon me. We are working with them to see what are the lessons learned, how can we make curricular infusions, and as part of that, I'm working with the Academic Council. As you know, faculty control the curriculum, working with faculty members, working with Dr. Williams and all the other faculty members who are already doing excellent work in this area, and how do we make sure we scale it up, whether it takes the space of Elon 101 that all the students take, any curricular processes or classes that students might take in between, all the way to the capstone courses where the students synthesize all this information and come up with a holistic idea. We have worked with faculty members as well as other administrative offices on campus to make sure the curricular infusion is happening. It's going through the process right now. What we hope is to wrap this process up by spring semester, go through faculty approval process, and implement it next year. But in the meantime, we're also making sure that we're taking short-term steps, right? As far as hiring goes, for example, we hired all the colleges and schools have done an excellent job in terms of hiring diverse faculty members. For example, this past year, our faculty members starting this fall, 61% of all faculty members hired are female. 37% of the faculty members hired are faculty members of color. It is more than what we currently have as a percent. What I tell the deans is, pleased but not satisfied. This is a great step, great first step, but let's keep going in this and make sure that we go in this direction. And also working with academic council and the staff advisory council to make sure that every employee, be it faculty or staff, are learning a little more about the space and see how they can do better. This coming year will be a transition year. We'll be working with faculty and staff to see how can we take some intermediate steps, recognizing that by next year, we need to have a little more concrete steps. So we're making a lot of progress in these, and it is also tied to their evaluations and other things. So that way, we're also ensuring that everybody is doing what they're doing. Between the curricular processes, between the hiring protocols, and between ensuring that all faculty members are following this protocol, we are very confident of making significant progress in the DES space and meet the challenge that President Book laid out for us. So I'm looking at the time. In the interest of time, I want to wrap this town hall meeting. I want to thank my colleagues for being part of this town hall. And thanks to members of Elon community for your great questions. I recognize we could not get through all the questions. We tried to lump some of these things, but we still got two more town halls. We'll make sure we'll address all those things. Thanks to all the faculty and staff for all you're doing under some very challenging circumstances. We are Elon strong, and with your resilience, we'll come out stronger. I'm in gratitude for your positive spirit and unfailing commitment to carry out Elon's mission. Please join us again next Friday at 1:30 in the same space. We'll look forward to continuing the discussion and sharing vital information with the entire Elon community, and keep sending your questions.